Saratoga Springs, Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020 at 6 p.m. Present tonight, I have Councilman Podeska, Councilman Wilden, Councilman Carn. We have Councilman Porter on the phone with us, and Councilman McComber has been excused. I've asked Councilman Podeska to lead us in our invocation and Councilman Wilden to lead us in our pledge.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this opportunity to meet together as city staff and residents and developers. We pray for Thy Spirit to be with us at this time, that we may be able to run a smooth meeting and address all the concerns that are needed, as well as making progress on various projects today. We ask for those that are unable to make it that they may travel in safety, and also ask you to please watch over those that serve and protect us and our city. And this we say in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Will the audience please rise and repeat the pledge with me? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public input. Time has been set aside for the public to express ideas, concerns, comments for subject matter not listed on the agenda. Please be respectful in your comments. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please avoid repetitive comments. And please state your name and address for the record. Is anybody here for public input at this time?
Sorry, the item is listed on the agenda.
But it's not a public.
You come up now because it's not a public hearing. Yes. Yes.
Just wanted to clarify. Tatiana Parker, 2833 Cottontail Loop in Saratoga. I'm the Villages of HOA, or Villages at Saratoga Springs HOA president, and just wanted to address the couple of items that will be discussed later on today. But just a couple things that we want to say is we would like to request that the roads in the neighborhood 4 in the Villages at Saratoga Springs HOA, that they be made public or city maintained as much as possible. And also we would request that all the driveways for any of the units are actually full-size driveways and not any kind of apron product, just because we have seen a lot of problems associated with that in one of our current developments within our HOA. So it's an ongoing huge issue. So we definitely don't want to do that again. So that is all. Thank you.
Anybody else here for public input at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public input. Reports from the council. Councilman Wilden?
I won't make it my report, but Mark, I think you're more familiar with it. Maybe as your part, giving an update on the legislative items would be good. So I attended electronically, but Mark was there in person.
Do you want me to do that under admin in a second? Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to dive into Wilden's request?
Oh, you bet. Yeah, so the legislature this year is going as it always does. Unreasonable requests met by cities panicking and being up in arms, and then hopefully some sort of a consensus being met. The big issue du jour this year is HB 273, I believe is the number. It is a bill by Val Peterson over in the Orem area, and the bill is really a bill that's being pushed through the development community. Basically, originally it was starting out as a bill that would hold cities and elected officials accountable if you voted against what could be considered or interpreted as a law. And in essence, if you violated your own code, even if you felt politically you should vote for it, and even if the council approved it, and ultimately gave them their request, they still could come after that, and they were looking for compensatory damages. It evolved. I mean, that was kind of the initial thought of what it was going to look like. The bill came out. It did have some flaws. It was questioning governmental immunity, which for us as a principle of the League of Cities and Towns and as cities, we never want to give up our governmental immunity. We do not want council members to be held personally liable or responsible for, actions taken that you feel is in the best interest of the community. You should be able to vote your conscience. There were some other principles that were being violated. They wanted to create punitive damages. In addition to attorney's fees, they wanted to create a punitive damages clause that basically said if you voted against a development activity or whatever, that there would be compounding damages. As of the meeting on Monday, the proposal, or they're going to amend the bill. They're going to cap, and it's no longer going to be punitive damages. It's going to be more of a kind of a liquidated damages concept. If theoretically you as a council were given very clear instructions that what you were doing was going to violate the law, and you knowingly, willfully, and it's a very high standard, I can't remember exactly what it is, but you intentionally tried to break the law, then the city would then be potentially eligible for damages if we went to the property rights ombudsman, if the ombudsman gave a ruling, and then you still voted against that to the detriment of the applicant. And so those damages are more of kind of a liquidated damage. It's being capped at 250. It is not making you as council members personally liable. It's not impacting governmental immunity, and it's really kind of a watered-down version. In reality, we can think of about 3 particular cases in the last, 10 years that the ombudsman's office has been created, where something like this would actually have gone through and been something that would be there. The damages are $250 a day from the time they file in district court until the case is resolved either in court or in court. The purpose of this is not to drag that out, those $250 a day. It's to tell the cities, do you really want to play chicken? Do you really want to go against an ombudsman decision, the property rights ombudsman decision? And do you really want to make your community financially liable because you're forcing a court decision on something that really should be a matter of you follow the law? So we understand this. There was a great deal of talk about this at the League of Cities and Towns. We feel like this is a moderate compromise. It's not great, but we believe that this bill will go forward. Uncorrected, it's $1,000, and it still has some of those other points. They've agreed in concept to these points, which if they get implemented the way that we've just, I kind of laid them out to you, we feel like it's probably something we could live with. And really, it's going after the bad actors. And again, we can think of 3 cases where bad actors would fall under this, and that is a knowingly and willfully breaking the law. So if we're only targeting bad actors, that's probably something that we can live with. So again, as a council, luckily, we'd not be one of those 3 cases. We did talk at length and say, basically, well, what happens if the citizens, let's say we go with the property rights ombudsman, and let's say the citizenry sues and overturns that decision through referendum, and we don't believe that this would have the same effect because in essence, it's a referendum at that point. It's not the council breaking the law. So that's kind of the short of it, and I apologize that it took 5 minutes to get to the short. Lots of other bills, lots of other issues, but that was the issue du jour that Stephen was bringing up.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councilman Carn?
Mine's not near as exciting as that, but I had the opportunity to teach AP Human Geography at Vista Heights and Lake Mountain, 2 classes at each in the last couple weeks. It was fun. Lots of great questions from those kids on city planning, and we talked about sewers and water, and we got a lot of city planners coming up through the school. It was good.
Do you have anything, Ryan? Mark or the rest of staff, any items? Oh, Jim's back, okay. The mayor.
Councilman Comber's trying to come into the meeting.
Oh, I forgot he was.
Okay. And Mark, do you have more for the administration?
We're just looking forward to the end of the legislative session. I think we got about 7 days left, so blessedly, it's coming to an end. But really, if that's the worst of the legislation that we're dealing with, we're doing okay overall. It has been, a lot of meetings. We've, I think, resolved a lot of issues with amendments and things as a team. That's been very productive. Overall, we've got a lot of development going on in the city, just kind of as a follow-up to some of the things that we've been talking about. The development activities are coming fast and furious. We have a lot of applications. We've got some issues that we're working with the development community. We'll be bringing some of these items to you in the future. But we look for probably a very packed meeting next week, or next meeting with bringing back some of the applications that have been kind of on the back burner. And once those applications are approved, the community plan and village plan amendments, and things of that nature, I suspect that you're going to see a kind of a log jam of issues that have been waiting for some of these amendments that are going to then fill your days with lots of applications. So we're excited. Staff's doing a great job, and we're very pleased. I do also want to mention that the police had their awards luncheon earlier today. It was very well put on. The police department's doing an excellent job. We're very, very pleased with all their hard work and appreciate your support of what they're accomplishing.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the business items. Library Board Bylaws and Code Amendment, Title 3.0503. Will you get a hold of him?
No, we tried calling and he didn't pick up yet, so we are working through that, so. No, I don't need that. Mayor and council, this is some bylaw changes to the library bylaws and codes. The main one is changing the board from 7 members to 5 members. I believe you're aware of this. This will help them with their quorum numbers and be able to meet and actually take action items. As well as function a little bit better. And then I think the only other change was to not have a library board member participate in any staff disciplinary hearings, since that's more of a management and HR function. So those are the 2 changes. Any questions, I would be happy to entertain. And staff's recommendation is to approve.
Okay, I will entertain a motion if there's no comments.
I'll move that we approve business item 1, resolution R20-12 dated today.
Second.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Wilden, a second from Councilman Carn. Any further discussion? Councilman Podeska?
Aye.
Councilman Wilden?
Aye.
Councilman Carn?
Aye.
Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Councilman McComber, have you guys been able to get him? Okay. Can we record his vote later? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. The villages at Saratoga Springs, Fox Hollow, neighborhoods 4, 12, and 13 rezone.
It's not advancing. Okay, here we go. So, as you mentioned, we have a rezone request, a general plan amendment request, and a master development agreement amendment request. And these requests apply to neighborhoods 4, 12, and 13. These neighborhoods are circled on the maps indicated. So the zoning map and the land use map amendments relate to the commercial uses within the development. The master development agreement requires 20 acres of commercial within the Fox Hollow development. And right now that 20 acres is slated to be next to Redwood Road. The applicant's proposal is to split that in half. And 10 acres would be near Redwood Road, and then just over 10 acres would be near the future Foothill Boulevard Freeway. So these are the areas indicated. There's a land use exhibit within the master development agreement, and you can see the proposed changes on exhibit D1. You can see how the commercial areas would change. Right now, they are indicated on the corners of the development. However, there are detention basins in those locations. And if it's centered along Redwood Road, they could potentially receive approval for an access in the center of the development. With the spacing that they have, there's a high potential that UDOT would approve that. And then there is also intended to be an interchange at the intersection of Village Parkway and Foothill Boulevard Freeway. And so they have proposed commercial on the west side of that particular interchange. And they are proposing to replace, right now, the land use map indicates residential for that particular spot. So here's a summary related to the density. So in neighborhood 4, they are still planning to maintain the same number of units that's currently in the agreement, which would be 335. However, the residential acreage would increase, so the density would be lowered. And then in neighborhood 12, they are requesting the same number of units. However, the acreage would be lower because of the freeway corridor, and that would slightly increase the density from 3.5 to 3.86. And then for neighborhood 13, it is currently approved for 125 units, and they would like to replace that with commercial zoning and would give up the residential units there. The zoning that they're proposing in, let me go back to this, in both locations is community commercial. Right now, the agreement requires 15 acres of neighborhood commercial and 5 acres of regional commercial. And community commercial is a balance between neighborhood commercial and regional commercial and would be appropriate next to residential. This diagram right here is their neighborhood 4 concept plan, so it indicates where the commercial parcels could be located, where the detention is located, and then a potential for how the residential and open space could be laid out. There are some comments. The HOA president stood up earlier and gave some feedback, and then there are additional comments from staff related to the concept plan. Because this isn't a PUD, variations would be proposed, and those would be reviewed with the preliminary plat. Public and private roads were not identified on the concept plan, and we were just asking that they meet, requiring that they meet city standards, whether they're public or private. And then you also heard the comment from the HOA president about the preference for public roads. The concept plan does indicate 337 units, and as I mentioned, they are allowed to have 335, so that would need to be modified. And then this comment was heard prior to the meeting that the HOA would prefer full-length driveways to avoid parking concerns. There could potentially be other ways to address that, such as larger garages or additional guest parking. So I wanted to add that as well. And then staff recommends, their recommended motions for either approval, continuance, or denial.
You want to come up to the table here?
My name is Brock Loomis with J. Fisher Companies, JF Capital. Sarah did a good job. I don't have a lot to add. Just wanted to talk. She talked about the what, just wanted to kind of talk briefly on the why. So we've owned these properties for roughly 8 years. And the reason it hasn't developed neighborhood 4 as of yet, after our 8 years going after it, is the commercial, just going at, looking at it with different brokers, different opportunities to get that big anchor of commercial in there that would then kind of spur the rest of the commercial to go. We haven't been able to make that happen. So we feel like if we can reduce this to the 10 acres and also utilize the new zoning of the community commercial, there's a lot of uses in there that we feel like could go sooner and be beneficial to the residents. And so that's kind of where we're at. And then we now know exactly where the Foothill Boulevard Freeway is with the right-of-way there. We feel like it could be beneficial to move that 10 acres up to that interchange as well. And then I did want to touch on as well with the HOA concerns. We talked about this a little bit in Planning Commission. Went back and kind of looked at our layout and what options we have. We want to hit different target markets with this development. If you look at the concept plan, you'll see a section of private roads, and they kind of look like an alley-loaded, we call them a cottage product, on the north side, and then it gradually gets bigger and bigger. We see 4 different product types going in here to be able to hit 4 different price points for potential buyers. We also understand the concerns, though, of, I believe the biggest concern, if I understand it correctly, is people are parking out on the streets, or they're parking on an apron and their trucks hanging out into the road. So it's something that we'd be willing to look at. We have looked at the issues that we come up with when we try and put a 20-foot driveway in a product like that, is the yards, roughly on most of those are 65 feet deep. You put a 40-foot deep home in there, 20-foot deep driveway, you're not left with a whole lot at the end, and we'd like to give the people some open space in their backyard to be able to use. So as Sarah mentioned, we would propose that we look at options such as guest parking. We took a drive up through the neighborhood today and kind of looked at some of the new developments and have been looking on the maps to see what people have been doing. And one thing I did notice on a lot of those private roads, I don't see guest parking. So we do see that could be something that could be looked at and could benefit. If we put enough guest parking in there that people have to be able to use, it could hopefully eliminate the problem. And then public and private roads, I think in our concept, the majority of our roads would be public, except for on these types of lots that we're talking about, where we would propose a private drive. Private drives lead to a lower cost home in those scenarios, and so that's why we propose that product type. So with that, if you have any questions for us, I'd be happy to answer them, and just appreciate you considering it.
Any questions? Councilman Carn?
This is for David. Have you had any conversations with commercial looking at the south end of the city down that way?
Yeah, actually, Brian Fugel, have you guys spoken with, I'm sorry, Brandon Fugel, I said Brian. Brandon Fugel, I know, was representing, is he still representing some of that commercial there? Spoke to him several months ago. So Brandon Fugel is the one that does, he's the big kahuna of Colliers here in Utah. So I know that I've been in talks with him, but that was several months ago.
About our property specifically?
Yeah, I believe so, right? Right off of Redwood
Yeah.
Road right there. Yeah.
We've had multiple, my name's Chad Bessinger with JF Capital. We've had multiple brokerages, including Colliers, look at the 20 acres since we've owned it for 8 years, and we've gone through this massive growth spurt. Obviously, we're trying to figure out what we could do with that commercial, and so we've had Brandon look at it. We've had other brokerages look at it, and
Are they representing you still, or?
we don't have a listing agreement right now with any
Okay,
commercial agents. So we're trying to accomplish this MDA amendment, giving us 10 acres of commercial laid out the way we've got it laid out. We feel like it's a layout that can bring uses for the residents right now. Whereas where we had 20 acres, we almost feel like you almost kind of have to have like a big box to start, and then you can kind of build out from there with 20 acres. But the way we have it laid out right now, we feel like we've got enough uses that we can attack right now. We've got gas guys that are constantly calling us, even though Maverick built on Ring Road. If you guys probably know, if you guys live south out there, the shelves at that Maverick are sometimes bare.
It's a popular place.
At night, yeah. But the other gas guys, I know there's not a lot of them that's building like Maverick is, but there are others that would definitely go on our site. And if we land a gas guy out there, I think there's going to be other uses that would open up, and I think we can fill that up, and it would be, additional amenities besides everything that the HOA provides, but for everybody at Fox Hollow and that lives south there and even a little bit north of there. So
I other than talking to a couple brokers several months ago, I haven't had any specific businesses reach out to me, but I think I don't see any qualms about getting commercial there, especially with the success of Maverick alone. If a gas station's that successful,
So I can see why it would be hard having that be regional commercial, putting something down there, especially the way it's zoned with those two weird pies, what we call those quarter circles maybe. But I do have a concern of moving 10 acres of commercial into an area that has no timeline in the future. Putting it out on Foothill means you're putting that out way into the future. But I can see the pros of changing that zone and and putting it together, getting it developed sooner than doing that.
To your
Yeah.
point, I mean, it's kind of the same thing with on Redwood Road. If we have 20 acres here, we feel like we're kind of almost crippled, and we can't really attack that commercial properly, because we have so much commercial, and we can't get any bites. Even though we've had
Yeah,
the success of all the residential built up around it, that you would think could possibly bring maybe a user. They're not there.
and you
with
want to take it to
everything-
community commercial, right? Is that what
Yeah,
the rezone is?
Yeah.
David, can you give me some examples of what that would be? I didn't bring that up.
So similar to regional commercial, but just taking out like tire shops and lube
Okay.
shops and things like that. Planning, Sarah, do you have any comments? Right?
So it is very similar to regional commercial without the really large.
Big uses.
The big box and,
Yeah.
and the other, the more intense uses that are in the regional commercial zone.
But gives them more flexibility than neighborhood commercial would.
Absolutely.
Neighborhood commercial has a size limit, so
Right.
neighborhood commercial has a maximum square footage. So this allows that in-between building.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's a good balance, so.
And then my other comment I wanted to make is my concern with guest parking, and if that's going to be HOA private, is guest parking, unless the HOA is, really enforces things, is storage. It's people's long-term storage, and it doesn't work. I've seen it in many neighborhoods with HOA guest parking. You get the broken-down truck that needs an alternator for the last 3 years, things like that. So I empathize with the HOA and their request there, and I understand why they don't want, the responsibility of those snow clearing and everything else. Would that possibly be a sub-HOA within the HOA? Where they'd be responsible for managing their own areas?
It would have to be, if it's a private road or attached housing, it would have to be a sub.
okay.
You want to come up?
Oh, sorry. The microphone?
Either one, yeah.
I feel so official. Oh, all right, no, sorry. So what I would do, am I supposed to repeat my name? Yeah. No, am I good? Okay. So in the past, so we have one other product, which is Neighborhood 2, which is the cottages, in our HOA that has private roads as well. Everything else is public roads. So because of that, because they're private roads and because it's a different product, it's a pod unit kind of a product, they have to be a sub-HOA because they have not only the roads they have to be maintained, they also have landscaping, AKA all their little, in between the little things that
Yep.
have to be maintained.
So this would, in the neighborhood that this would go in, that would have to be a sub-HOA?
That is correct.
So you wouldn't manage that anyway?
As a master, we
Right.
would still oversee it.
Sure.
The developer would
I-
kind of
yeah.
have they would run it until they get to a certain percentage.
But
and
the
then we'll
sub
get
would have
turnover.
to maintain plowing and parking enforcement and everything else?
That is correct. Yeah, it doesn't make it any easier, unfortunately.
I
It's-
understand
but-
very well.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it would most likely, especially in your roads that would be a private road or anything different other than your single-family detached house on the public road, that would have to be a sub HOA. So,
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Step off, and I apologize, I just want to make sure that Sarah and Tanya, do we need to, if they decide to make that a motion, is that a motion that the council would need to include in there, or is that already covered in the other CCNRs or other documents?
So the concept plan is on here, I don't know on. Okay, the concept plan is on here for informal feedback. The other items, the rezone and the amendment, they're not tied to the concept review.
Okay. So that would be my feedback. That would absolutely need to be a sub-association and not managed by the master. They can deal with their own problems in the unique community that you'd be creating. I know that as someone who's been on the master side, that is not something I want to deal with.
I agree.
Okay. Anything else, Councilman Carn?
No.
Okay. Councilman Wilden?
I also live in an HOA and served in a similar position as Councilmember Carn. The commentary about guest parking, it sounds great in concept, but give it 5 years and the same thing happens all over the city. They're going to be parking in it. But with old cars that you have to tow out and makes fun for everyone. But I would agree with the commentary. My feedback is if we're going to bring in a whole new development or not development, but expand the existing development with additional private roads and different things like that, that my potential future approval on those items would be contingent upon that, because not placing new burdens on existing residents, we wouldn't do that as a city either. And we have similar situations where we're creating, what are they, SID, Special Improvement Districts, so those residents pay for what they're using. So the rest of this development shouldn't be paying for maintenance of any of those other things. And so that's my feedback on there. And I feel like we've talked about this, a half a dozen times over the past 6 to 8 years, or 6 years for me anyway. Mayor, like 10 years for you.
Yeah.
And it was good to go back to my notes. I can get behind a 50-50 split. That's kind of what I've said in the past, and I'll stick to that. The community commercial seems like a reasonable place to land. My question is, so on the western, I'm not on the right screen, but the western neighborhood, we're removing the commercial in. We talk about just a minor increase in density. It was like, what, a 3.5, 3.8? Yeah, 3.8. How much does that, of that 3.8, I know we're not talking about a lot, but we're talking about a lot of homes in that development. What is leading to that? Are we having additional specific type of product type, a higher concentrated product type that's going to be more in that area now?
The main thing that's leading to that is that they are preserving land for the Foothill Boulevard Freeway. So they are keeping the same number of units that's already in the agreement on less acreage.
Yeah, I understand that, but are they like,
The
are
product?
you adding more, say, townhomes?
Lots.
Shrinking lots, more townhomes? I don't know. I don't think there's condos.
Oh, That
approved.
particular density would
can-
still be single family.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to do, like Brock mentioned before, the idea is to have 4 different products and price points in there. Instead of doing 50 acres of, 50 wide product and having the same stuff. The idea is to have different product, different price points. You could possibly have the same builder, maybe 2 builders in there. They're not,
Sorry to interrupt, he's referring to neighborhood 13,
oh,
or 12, neighborhood 12.
Yeah.
So the density in neighborhood 12 is going up slightly because the acreage is going down slightly because of the Mountain View corridor. So he's asking about the product type that would end up in neighborhood 12.
We've not conceptually planned neighborhood development.
But generally, a 3.86 is a single family.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually it's 6 or higher, and 6 is even low for attached, so it's usually about 8 and higher when you're talking about townhomes.
Okay, that's helpful, because if we're looking at, I mean, the reality is, we're doing something to accommodate what you guys are asking for, and if we were moving that up, keeping the same number of units, but you're gonna add a whole bunch of townhomes, my vote on the rezone would be no. But based upon that, I mean, we're looking at single-family
Right, and
homes.
it's, right.
a 3.8 unit per acre would be a super low density for a townhome product, so they would for sure definitely be
Yep.
single family, yep.
Okay.
Sound good?
Councilman Podeska?
So on the zoning, just, brief history on that when this concept map was created on the zoning is really kind of the south end of the city at that point. Since then, we have larger developments going in south to Guayo that's going to have commercial in that area as well. And so this is really kind of the center point of the neck of the city. And so I've always agreed that moving half of that up to Foothill Boulevard to where there's commercial on both those north and south interchanges of Redwood and Foothill. So I'm, yeah, complete support of splitting that up. And then also changing it to community commercial, is it? Yeah. It just makes more sense, because, yeah, we're not going to get big box in that area. And then as far as on the concept, my feedback would be, I think I do see 2 roads going out onto Redwood, and whereas before is talked about just having 1. So I guess what's the change there? Is UDOT going to approve that?
Yeah, so those are pre-approved. We put in utility crossings. We worked with UDOT over the past 5 years, and about 3 years ago, we put in utility crossings. When UDOT came in and redid Redwood Road, they passed a moratorium that nobody could cut into those, so we worked with UDOT and putting in utility crossings, like I'm repeating myself, so that we could go develop the neighborhood 4 in the future, because they were passing a moratorium. You can't cut into that road for like 10 years or something. Okay. So yeah, those are essentially approved with UDOT.
Okay. And then, let's see. Just kind of echo the sentiments on the guest parking and. I think those are going to be
Address the issue really quickly, if you don't mind.
Please.
I could wait till the end
No,
if
go
you like
for it.
as well, but, so typically what happens when an HOA is set up, they have rules for when property is added to the HOA, and, you mentioned the HOA is here, and they mentioned a concern about creating a sub-association and areas of this property that they don't want to maintain, and I think those are legitimate concerns. We haven't typically tried to involve or insert ourselves in private agreements and regulations of property like CC&Rs and bylaws and so forth on HOAs. I want the council to just be aware that in the future, when the actual subdivision approval comes in front of you, that you're not going to be able to impose a requirement that they create a sub-association to maintain certain areas. We don't have that as a code requirement. Legally, we cannot impose unexpressed conditions that are not in our code. And I'm not sure that we want to get involved with private contracts and regulations between parties. If that's something you wanted to regulate, you may be able to like make a condition at this stage with the development agreement and with the rezone. I would suggest that before you do that, that you possibly get a legal opinion from the master HOA that they can require the sub-association to maintain those areas. I would really hesitate inserting ourselves if we didn't have to. But if that's a legitimate concern of the council, just understand that if you want to regulate that, you won't be able to do that later. Possibly you can regulate that now with the rezone and the development agreement, as this is a legislative decision. But later down the road, you're not going to be able to make that a condition of approval.
I guess how does it differ from their existing neighborhood 2 that already has a sub? That it has their own regulations?
I'm not
there?
sure.
Okay.
And maybe you have that in your rules, that, like I said, there's, HOAs have bylaws, and within those bylaws are rules about how properties can be added to it, and it talks about maintenance of common areas and creation of sub-associations, and preferably those rules are all set out in advance, and so you don't have to deal with this issue later on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how your HOA is set up. I have looked at the village's bylaws at some point. I don't know why, but they're quite lengthy. So my guess is that that detail's there, but I'm not sure how that HOA manages that. But I would guess that they have some rule about sub-associations and when those are needed.
Yeah, so I guess in continuing that discussion there is that it just be making sure that it's not a burden that's placed on the rest of the HOA if it is private, like neighborhood 2. Again, if it's within codes, as far as the driveways, my recommendation is not doing that. I see those developments where if they can't fit on the driveway, they're gonna just park in front of their garage anyway. And it does create problems. And so it's hard because like you mentioned, it creates a more affordable home. But however, the affordability of the home doesn't reduce the number of cars that they have, where they live there. So that just be concerns there as you're kind of looking at the concept plan. That's it.
Councilman Wilden?
Well, I would just say, I agree with Councilman Podeska. If it's in the code, that's what you can do. But if you come back and you're asking for something different, like a shorter driveway or private streets to some other standard, that's when, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can say, well, if you want this variance, we want to see you do X. And that's kind of where I'm at, not saying you
Okay,
have some legal
understood.
entitlements and you have code, but if you're going to go anywhere against code to get me to vote for it, you're going to have to commit that the burden won't be placed on them. And that's not, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that's inserting, it's just saying, we're not going to accept a variance unless you meet certain requirements.
Okay, so you're saying that you would only consider that variance if they create a sub-association in the future?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. At that point, I don't think the code is gonna allow that type of a variance. I like to call it an exception. A variance is a different process.
Okay, I meant
completely.
exception, but
But I don't believe the code allows that exception. Sarah could correct me if I'm wrong. So it would probably require a code amendment, and at that point, you're making a legislative decision to grant that. Am I right, Sarah, that the code does the code allow shorter driveways? I'm not aware of that
Well,
exception in the code.
I know that Fox Hollow is its own animal as far as PUD goes. I'd have to look and see. There's several exceptions in there that they can request and that they can't request, and I'd have to pull it up.
Yeah.
so I think my whole point is obviously what's in code, that's what you're allowed to do. If you're coming and it's an exception or variance or special request, I tried to cover all three words so that whatever the appropriate terminology is that Kevin will fix in the minutes for me later. If you're asking for something that you're allowed, let's just make sure that would be my standpoint on it. So, did I get at least one of the three words right on that? You weren't
think so.
listening.
I
Okay.
think so. I tuned out like minutes ago. No, I was listening. That makes perfect sense.
How you rate.
What?
How you rate. Yep. Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I have,
Sorry. Councilman Porter?
yeah, I just wanted to, speak a little bit about the commercial. I do have, I was supportive of a 50-50 split, I think, when we previously looked at that. I'm okay with changing it to community commercial down below. Honestly, my biggest concern is that 10 acres is probably not going to be enough at that future interchange of commercial, but at least we're getting some up there. I think that will eventually be the larger focus of commercial activity, just because there will be the freeway there. Redwood will become more of a local road rather than a regional transportation option once the Mountain View corridor comes through. So I'm fine with that. I would agree with what Councilman Wilden as well as what Kevin said, is that I personally don't want to insert the city council into what is essentially a HOA matter. It sounds like since they already have a sub-association that they have the means to create a sub-association, and I would just encourage them to work that out so that they can move forward in that direction. And then I'm trying to remember as the driveways. I would agree with what Councilman Wilden just said, that if you're coming in for anything beyond what you're already permitted to do through code and through the PUD, that there's going to be, I'm going to look at that much more closely, just because a lot of people talk about how the guest parking fills up. The garages tend to fill up. I know at my house, our cars are more often than not parked in the driveway because because the garage is full of whatever project I'm working on that weekend. So the garage is still up and becomes storage, and the cars get pushed out onto the apron. And so if there's not a full driveway, that's kind of where my concern is, not necessarily providing for guest parking, but providing the residents so they can get their cars out of the drive aisle. So that, I guess those are my comments.
Okay. Mark?
And I'm here now too, Jim.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
So I was here for 95% of this conversation. I apologize, I was having some technical difficulties. So I'm not exactly sure. I heard the different discussions around concerns and variance, not variance. I heard Kevin lecture Stephen on that. But so for me, I'm okay with the rezone for the community commercial. Again, I would agree with Councilman Call that that's a concern, the amount of space on the west side, but they could always come back. And I'm sure I think you cut out a little bit, Councilman Call, but they could always come back and maybe ask for more. And as a council in the future or whoever's there, they could potentially provide more to meet the demands on that busy road. For the length of the driveways, I have been doing this for 10 years, and it always comes back to bite if we make an exception. Fox Hollow is a much older neighborhood. They've had their various issues, but I personally would not be in favor of shortening driveways at all. Because the whole point of that was set up for a reason. Councilman Call, you just outlined very clearly why people, personally park on there, and then guests are even parking on the road, and then even a lot of homes you have that third car and then they're parking on the roads too. So we already have an issue with road parking without with having the driveway, and if we take that out of the equation, the worst thing is having cars hanging out over the sidewalk and even potentially into the road. Some of you guys have some big trucks out there. So those are some of my concerns. So again, the neighborhood commercial, fine with that. And then just for future, I would not be in favor of shortening the driveways. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. There's no further discussion.
I had one other question.
Yep, you go for it.
Just clarification, owners of N12 and N13, you guys own that as well? Okay. I just want to make sure that they're aware of the commercial being moved up to their area, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there are no further discussions, I'll entertain a motion.
Fine. I'll move that we approve business item 2 as stated, including any staff findings and conditions.
Okay. I have a first from Councilman Wilden.
A second.
I have a second from Councilman Podeska. Any further discussion on the motion?
Just to clarify, since I did come in a little late, the approval is really for the zone changes. The other one was concept plan, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman McComber.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Karn.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Councilman McComber, on the library board bylaws, were you in favor of those for the record?
Yes, thank you. Aye.
Perfect. Okay, business item 3, code amendments, Title 19, conditional use permits.
Council, coming off the heels of your special meeting you had in January, where you eliminated all conditional use permits, we as staff have brought back the table to you as well as some other additions. We had been already working on this, but based on your meeting from that January, we obviously put this to the forefront and did a rush speed job to get back to you. So basically what we've done, we've gone through the table, changed anything that was a conditional use to permitted. We've also, added some uses, various zones. We have proposed taking some uses out, that sort of thing. We can go through page by page if you want the table, or take specific uses you have questions on, and go from there. We'd just like to also recognize Rachel did a lot of the groundwork on this item, and she's put a lot of time into this, and I just want to let you know that what she's done on that. So how would you like to proceed, Mayor?
Does council have a preference on whether just ask questions or go through page by page? No.
I mean, I did read it in advance, so I prefer not necessarily go page by page. I do have a question, and then maybe we could go through some of the items on the table
Okay.
versus the 17 pages. So if you could read everything out loud as fast as you could, that would be great. You got 5 minutes. No, my one question, well, I have a couple others, but that's just on the table. But the one thing, it was on there is we were talking about, we added some verbiage around drive-through, and it seemed like there was more changes than I was anticipating there. What are we trying to accomplish
Well, we
there?
looked at it and to say, let's actually put drive-through as a use and identify what zones you can have a drive. You got drive-throughs for lots of things, banks, restaurants. I've used a drive-through dry cleaners before. And so we thought it would be beneficial to actually, name the zones where you could do a drive-through. Like for instance, neighborhood commercial. For a low intensity zone like that, we thought, would you want to drive through in a neighborhood commercial zone? Probably not. So for instance, we said in the table, no drive through neighborhood commercial, but identified it in the other zones.
So, but like a neighborhood commercial, would that allow for like, say, a Jimmy John's or Subway or something like that? Correct me if- like a deli shop?
Yeah, under the restaurants, let me just go to the table here.
Because I think that could go in neighborhood commercial, and like a
Yeah,
Subway does have
you
a
could still
drive,
do restaurants in neighborhood commercial,
but
but
they have a drive-through.
no.
Yeah, well, Subways do have drive-through.
Right, but if they want to go in a neighborhood commercial, they would not.
Okay.
We're just trying to, neighborhood commercial obviously is the lowest intensity use commercial. And we thought, drive-throughs, stacking of cars, that sort of thing, let's eliminate it. At least that's our proposal anyway, out of the neighborhood commercial. It is obviously the option in the other commercial zones.
So I had that same question because I saw like a Kneaders, like a bakery can go in a neighborhood commercial. Kneaders kind of falls into that, but they have a drive-through.
We'd classify Kneaders as a restaurant, but true, if they were to go in a neighborhood commercial, of course, most Kneaders have a drive-through that I've seen.
Right.
It's where most of their sales come.
The other question and this is probably a dumb question, but drive-through where people don't get out of their cars, it says that. What about the drive-throughs where the employees are in the drive-through all the time? Like a Chick-fil-A is an example, where they're outside taking your orders and there's people in the drive-through regularly during peak hours. Does that matter?
Nothing says you can't stand in a parking lot as an employee, I guess.
Okay, but the people can't get out of their cars.
Right, and then they don't. Obviously, they're there to speed up the order process.
Okay.
I would be interested in, phenomenal work, by the way. Thank you. But I would be interested to hear everyone's thoughts. I totally understand. I actually really appreciate what you're trying to do with the neighborhood commercial on there. My one thought, though, was some of these smaller, not that we need another, we have a Subway, but certainly. Two Subways? Where's the other one?
Walmart?
Oh, yeah, forgot about that one. Not related. You totally distracted me. But anyway, the point is, if one of these others came in as appropriate spot for a neighborhood, I wouldn't necessarily want to discourage it from there. And it seems like you put in enough conditions around there. It'd have to be a reasonably designed drive-through to limit the stacking. So, I mean, based upon that, my preference would be to allow it for neighborhood commercial at this point with the great parameters that you put in place. And then the other question I'd have is there any, well, never mind. I already know the answer to that.
And our thoughts are, we just thought it's a low impact neighborhood. We're not opposed to it being there. We just thought being a low impact commercial use, let's just remove the option for drive-throughs.
No, I'm glad you brought it. I just think we ought to have a conversation. That was one of the main things I was looking at.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Carn?
Call.
Rebecca?
Yes, Commissioner Call.
So, just, it's,
I have some
Michael?
questions around, was that Michael?
Yeah, I think that was Michael.
it was, but you gave it to Karn, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm waiting my turn.
Okay.
So I've got some questions around and this was brought up at planning and I was multitasking, so I didn't hear all the answers. But around the distances that we've defined for hotels and storage units, where did we come up with some of those numbers? Those numbers we just kind of made up?
For the most part, we looked at what other cities are doing, but in reality, you can make a case that a setback of 25 feet is made up where 24
Sure.
could be. So there is some, numbers that we may just think that sounds appropriate.
So is
We also did mirror Lehigh
okay,
in regards to the hotel. And I apologize. We did mirror Lehigh in relation to the hotel setbacks. And it really, they were about the only city that had that kind of a footprint or that kind of a setback. So we were trying to mirror that. On that, it would preclude the location that is adjoining that residential. There was a property to the north, a couple of parcels. It's the parcel north of the new junior high parcel. That one, the 350-foot setback would allow for a hotel to go on that parcel. So, I mean, again, you need to consider, do you think that's too close? If so, then you probably need to change that number.
are they already vested on that property
No,
with that?
when that came through for the.
It's just a concept?
For the zone change, it's Saratoga Northgate.
Yep,
If you recall, the council put regional commercial along Redwood and then put a.
Office warehouse behind
Office
it.
warehouse.
Yeah.
Right, and when the concept plan came to the council, again, it's non-binding, of course, but they did show a hotel on that concept plan.
okay, so my concern with 300 feet, because I did get some resident feedback when that concept came to the city. I'm just concerned, is that enough without being too restrictive to business?
That's what I wanted to add too. So that was a lot of what the staff discussion was, is we looked at a lot of other cities that Rachel pulled up, and Lehigh had these kind of distances. And as a side note, at another meeting, I actually talked to Lehigh's mayor about some of the similar issues that they ran into with public feedback and things. And but in all, what we wanted to do was create a distance that was balanced, that wouldn't preclude us looking at the city holistically. So we didn't want to create distances that were so great that it would prevent us being able to put hotels in other potential locations. And we felt that these distances, looking at the city as a whole, provided a better opportunity to not completely prevent other hotels in other areas that might not be.
Well, that's a great example right there. So you're about 300 feet from that property, that fence line to Redwood, about.
So those properties actually are already accounted for and aren't available.
Yeah, so none
No,
of
but I'm
those.
just, as an example,
Yeah, sure.
that's a great example from where someone was talking about a project. Is that enough of a push to give people what they feel is the buffer? Now, you also have to be, for that example, 500 feet from a school property, which completely rules that project out for that property if this happens. I'm okay with the.
Well, but
the-
it's not from the property line, it's from.
Right, it's from the structure now. We discussed that and thought, well, you could have a hotel on a large parcel that has multiple buildings, multiple uses.
Right.
Let's just, a 6-acre parcel, who knows what it is, but that's why we go by the parcel. I mean, you could be quite a distance away actually from the hotel. So we thought going from the
You could have
hotel
a school on this
itself.
side of the property and a hotel, yeah.
So we
I
thought
get
from the
that.
building itself to the residential zone would be the most appropriate.
And so from the school, it's from the school structure, and are you saying from the houses, it's from the structure of the property
A
line?
house, it's the property line. Hotel, it's the structure.
Okay,
So basically, it would be if you have a residential zone, it's the line of that residential zone to the building structure of a hotel.
okay, so
So-
not to the hotel's property line, but to the actual structure.
And keep in mind, this is a recommendation of distances that we're trying to do. We're trying to create buffers that gives the council an ability to say, we've created standards of how close they can be to schools and residences. So if you as a council, as the policymakers feel like it needs to be greater, it needs to be less, or different approach, let us know. But this is what we felt like was the most appropriate balance based on everything we looked at and everything that we
Well, I
discussed.
think it's a good
So-
compromise from where we may have been
Right.
with, just lot setbacks to property fences, that was gonna be a problem. And I'm okay with the A. I guess I want to hear what other council members have to say about the distance in 1B for hotels.
And perhaps I may have heard Dave wrong as well, but both of them are from the hotel building to the property line.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
That's correct.
I'm curious what people's opinion is on C for the travel trailers and campers in the hotel parking facilities. Is that something you saw similar in other cities
Rachel?
when developing this?
Yeah, I didn't make up any of the standards. They're all based off of other cities.
Okay, because I know you can go like to a Walmart and camp in their parking lot.
And we have had issues with that in the past, and we've enforced it as well.
That you've enforced?
It took some time, but yeah, I know, I believe Brad did, as well as the police department, to get them to move, and they, at least on a Walmart, they finally did.
We get people camping in the old Smith's parking lot fairly regularly. A week at a time, I've seen.
So Commissioner, or Councilmember Carn, the illustrative example that I wanted to point to here was the North Gate. So in this particular concept plan, you can see the hotel is located, it would be outside that square footage. So again, you want to consider this. If you think this is too close, looking at this potential site plan, then you probably ought to increase that number from that to something else. But if you think that we can buffer that appropriately, then that's where we're at. My only concern is I don't want you to have a knee-jerk reaction if this application comes in and the residents aren't happy because 350 feet or whatever is not a large enough buffer.
Right, so that concept I'm good with because you've got office warehouse buffering between that and the residential. I don't know if 300 feet is enough to create a buffer besides just open space. I'll yield my time here.
Okay, Councilman McComber?
Thank you. And I apologize publicly. I've been up for 22 hours straight, and I didn't mean to say Oliver Carn earlier. I meant to say Carn. So I literally am so groggy right now. It's unbelievable.
3 or 4 times, but that's okay.
No, I know. I realized it afterward. But so I just was looking at the changes here. Again, I appreciate all of the work that was done. I think that I've stated on the drive-through on the hotel, I would like to almost see the distances be the same for both school and residential, because the purpose of it is the location to proximity to children, and a lot of homes have children. And so that's just me. And the travel trailers, the key word is occupied. So obviously someone can come and rent a hotel room and then they just don't stay in their trailer. But I think that obviously that's something we want to have in there and enforce. And then to the whole point of the Smith's parking lot, we just need to make sure that we let the police know that, and code enforcement, so that they, in the planning department code enforcement, that we enforce that and don't allow that to happen. So if we see it, please send a note, because that's definitely transient sleeping, right? That's a transient environment, and that could actually, I'm not saying that every single person does it is that, but it can lead to additional crime. And these aren't even residents who are paying any kind of taxes or any kind of fees at all to help offset the impact that they potentially could have. And then for me, the other area that I was looking at is the kennel private. Are there changes in here? Because underlined red, and I'm not sure what the original content was, or is that just meaning it's staying the same?
Which use did you? Which use did you refer to?
The kennel's
The
private.
kennel.
I don't think we had regulations
private.
for kennels private prior to this.
Yeah, I don't think there were.
So is there a grandfathering clause at all? Because there are a lot of kennels in our city that are these just only within individual homes and their yards that are breaking this rule.
This would only apply, those uses would be non-conforming or grandfathered. So this would only apply to new uses.
Well, and our definition for that type of kennel would be if they have 4 or more. So the ones that have 3 or less, this wouldn't apply.
So where does it say 4 or more?
In the definition,
So if you're a
Okay.
private homeowner, you want to raise a certain type of dog or whatever, that you would be classified as a private kennel at that point.
And I should
you
clarify,
want to-
you only get non-conforming or grandfathered use if you were legal in the first place. So you'd have to look at any of those kennels that were pre-existing to these changes, and whether they met the code at that time. If they were there and they were illegal uses, they don't get grandfathered or status.
That's right. Thank you, Kevin, for that clarification. I remember you sharing that once before around grandfather clauses, so I appreciate that. So I just want to make sure that that's the area that I just have some questions. So so the kennel private, if there's a definition that says what a kennel private is, I missed that.
Yes, 4 or more, 4 dogs, right, Sarah? 4?
right?
Okay, great. Then that covers that for me. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Podeska?
Yeah, so to go off of Councilwoman Cumber's question on the 500 feet versus the 300, just having a 500 from schools and residential. Dave Johnson, what does that do? You said that you kind of looked in other areas throughout our city of where hotels could reside. Is that 500 then
And
basically
I'd
not
have
make
to,
it available?
I haven't
in our
looked
city?
at the map for a little bit on that one, but
Okay.
I'd have to pull it up and kind of look.
Because that's where I don't want to like settle on a feet and then all of a sudden it just disqualifies it anywhere in our city.
Yes, I agree. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the
I
map.
can
just-
address that in part.
Okay.
It wouldn't fit quite there. And I just want to add that we made our standard a little more restrictive than the Lehigh one because the Lehigh one was actually from pedestrian path. And we didn't do pedestrian path. We just did building separation.
Okay. So if it was at 500, then we could still have hotels within our city.
From schools and parks, yes. From residential would be much harder.
Okay.
Plan on the north end of the city, I have the distance measured right there, and it's approximately 480 feet to the proposed, the one on the proposed concept plan and the Harvest Hills development. We can also go to that area over by the high school.
So sorry, I'm just getting the map and I'm kind of measuring things myself. So, yeah, I mean, 500 feet over by the high school, where the office park zone is across from Wander. 500 feet wouldn't preclude that there. Obviously, neither would 300 feet from the schools. Sorry, I'm just trying to take a quick glance because we talked about this a few weeks ago. From
So
what I could,
that's about 500 feet from the high school, right there up on the screen.
yes, thank you, Sarah.
Sure. This direction? Okay.
So in theory, as Pony Express grows, that would preclude also basically that little buffer area right there.
The other thing,
You got schools in 2 locations.
Is it possible to show the graphic to those of us on the electronic?
Yeah.
I just, you're talking about a map and I can't see it.
I'm pulling it up right now, Chris.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So the other thing is, so for example, the current existing application that had that concept, if they wanted to go right in that area, I mean, they could, even if it was 1,000 feet, they could still go probably across Redwood Road.
So I guess in that situation, what would keep them from just doing a parking lot in front of the hotel?
Well, there are some parking standards as far as where parking has to be located. The code does talk about that parking needs to be primarily located to the side and the rear of a building.
Okay.
Right, so then it pushes it even further, so that's an excellent question, because we've got other standards that kind of prevent a little bit of that gaming, if that makes sense, too.
Okay. I guess in moving on, just one other kind of clarification is drive-through on the neighborhood commercial. I would also be for allowing that, just kind of looking through the list there. tongue-in-cheek churches if they want to do drive-through weddings. I'm kidding. But there are like financial institutions that's allowed in there. And so to be able to allow drive-throughs in those kind of situations. But yeah, I guess it's like, for me, it's 6s on 300 feet or 500 feet. I'm good with either.
The other thing, sorry, that one thing that didn't make it in here that one of the planning commissioners mentioned, the planning commission that we're going to look at with the round two. So obviously you saw with the hotels, there's a couple zones that are exceptions. I believe they were mixed use, and what was the second one?
For hotel?
Mixed waterfront.
Mixed waterfront, thank you. One commissioner brought to our attention was, what about rural residential? Where maybe you're on a 5-acre lot and your house is clear over here, like for example, where the high school is, that's rural residential right there. Does the property line make sense? Necessarily doing it from the property line? Should rural residential be an exception? And he brought this up because he lives in rural residential. He lives right where those homes are in the rural residential, and was saying that him and his neighbors would actually be in favor of a hotel going right there in the business park area. And so he just brought that up as a point of, should rural residential also be an exception in that kind of manner, given the different dynamic of a 5 or a 10-acre lot that rural residential is going to probably be on, so.
So if there's like a mix between the two, so if it was 500 feet, then it's maybe from building to building instead of property.
Yeah, on maybe rural residential, that would be the exception. It would be from building to building in a situation like that. Whereas if you're on like 1/4-acre lots or, 10th-acre lots or whatever, you have the 300 feet and the 500 feet standard or something like that,
Okay.
so.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Okay, Councilman Wilden.
Did Porter want to go first, or?
Oh, I didn't know Porter was waiting.
I guess.
I'm happy to let Councilman Wilden go first, or I can go.
Go for it.
So you have,
Councilman
like-
Wilden's
All right.
patient.
Yeah, I'm struggling on the 300 or 500. I wasn't able to see the map that you guys were discussing. I'm trying to, I guess I could go either way. I'm open to since it seems like we're just, it's not that it's arbitrary, because we are basing it off of what our neighboring cities are doing, but we can basically set the number at any level we would choose, and that would be acceptable. So I'm open to people convincing me one way or another, whether 300 is better than 500 or vice versa. As far as the other, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up my screen here. The drive-through commercial.
He said as far as drive-throughs go.
You're breaking up, Chris.
Sorry, I think Michael's mic is on, and so it's cut. We're cutting back and forth.
Two Big Macs.
So did you get my comments about the hotel distance then?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The drive-through in the neighborhood commercial, I'm comfortable with allowing that. When looking through the chart, David, one of the major things I was looking for was anything where there was something that changed. We had a lot of conditionals, and we changed some of those to permitted. And so I was looking for things where permitted were being put where conditional use wasn't allowed before. And one that stood out to me was the tattoo shop. We're adding it as a permitted use in regional commercial, where previously it was not even a conditional use. I'm just interested in the reasoning there.
Well, we look at there, the ones that I've worked around and staff had some other input, they're really just a storefront like anything else.
Okay.
And so we thought, why not?
Okay. I'm just, I don't know if if other council members have an opinion on that or not. I just, like I said, I was looking at places where we're allowing things where they weren't previously allowed, even conditionally, and that was just one that stood out to me.
And we thought parlor was an outdated term as well.
That's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I just, I noticed that we're still restricting tobacco shops to industrial and office warehouse, and so sometimes people conflate the two. So those were my. The other one was the storage or self-storage. At least in the report I'm looking at, it was highlighted as kind of like the staff needed direction from council which way we wanted to go with that.
Yeah, the planning commission recommended the separation of storage units of half mile.
Okay. So I guess my thought is, in the office warehouse, maybe that makes sense so that they're not all pumping together in the office warehouse, but in the industrial, I mean, that's kind of the point of an industrial zone, is to clump things like that together. So I guess I was, I might feel that it's appropriate to have that separation in one zone, but maybe not in the other.
Yeah, when we were looking at that, we thought there's probably not going to be a lot of office warehouse in the city, and certainly even less industrial. And with the half mile separation, that even limits it further of where you can go.
Because don't we already have? We have some behind Car Doctors, and then we have one that's fairly close.
Correct. And you
There's
had
also
and you did the Saratoga Northgate, where the previous conversation about the hotel. You zoned that office warehouse, but you actually eliminate in the development agreement that you have in the DA that no storage units are allowed in that particular office warehouse zone. So that zone is there, but there will not be any permitted storage units there.
But I believe we were looking at a concept plan, perhaps, or an application for the property north of Car Doctors that was going to have, on the Brown property, I guess it was.
Yeah,
Brown property.
That's the storage units that east of the canal are going into Lehigh. But yeah, you're correct. Basically, up north, we'll have 3 different storage unit facilities in the northern portion of the city. So the idea of the half mile was not only so that all of our OW and industrial, so that it doesn't get eaten up all by storage units, but also so it kind of spreads it out through the city so that not all the storage units are just on the north end of town.
Okay. Yeah, so, and then going back to the hotel, as far as the distances, as I've been thinking about it, a concern I guess something we've looked at before is, not all distances are created equal. 300 feet from a residential, like in the Northgate property, is one thing, but 300 feet across the Mountain View corridor, separated by a major arterial road, is a completely different thing. And so I'm wondering if we want to, if we choose to go with the higher 500 foot from residential, that we put in some sort of stipulation that it could be lower if separated by an arterial or greater roadway. Because I mean, I would hate to preclude them from being able to put that type of use anywhere along Redwood Road. In the DAP, just because Wander is across the street, and so we're basically pushing that use away from the major traffic corridors, which is where they generally tend to want to locate, as far as I have noticed in my life.
Yeah, I suppose we could have it written that a hotel that's located on a major arterial is not required to follow any separation requirements.
I mean, it would have to be across an arterial in my mind, because just because you're on Redwood Road doesn't mean that we want you backing onto houses. We don't want necessarily one going into the Thrive development. That may not be a great use for that location. But if they're going on the other side of Redwood Road, I'm less concerned, and so maybe that distance shrinks. I'm just throwing something out there to see what other council members might think. And I'll listen to what you guys have to say.
Can I make a comment?
You bet.
I do, Councilman Porter, like your suggestion on the hotel. I mean, just stepping back a little bit, fundamentally, we're looking at a specific product or in a very specific location of whether or not we're going to be comfortable with that. And I think that's where the footage came up with, and that was the direction that the staff received from council and the mayor at the time. And that's where I think the 300 and 500 foot really came from.
It also reflects kind of very similar to what Lehigh does too, just as a.
Yeah, that's a good point, but we.
Right.
Yeah, and so to me, it's fundamentally, are we comfortable with it in that location or for if we ever got in another similar spot? Interestingly enough, the feedback I got from the residents, and normally I don't get as probably a substantive amount of feedback on projects, but this one I got beat by emails, and that's not an appropriate word, but I got a ton of emails and phone calls. My wife was getting called because I guess people are afraid to talk to me or something like that. I don't know. He gets it. Their biggest concern was the proximity next to the school. Not even the houses at that point. I do think, though, that 500 feet is probably an appropriate thing, especially if the school hasn't been built yet. But the 350 potentially could be close. So I do like Councilmember Porter's suggestion of it's 500 feet unless it's separated by an artillery road. So if they went on the other side of the Redwood Road and they're within 350 feet, but they're separated, or not 350 feet, within 500, but over 300 feet or something like that, and they're separated by a road, they could do that. So I do think that is a good suggestion and compromise there. And circling all of that back, I never finished my train of thought. I got a lot of comments on it, and people just aren't going to be comfortable with that. And we're in a legislative decision changing codes right now, and I think I need to go with, personally, I would be okay with it, but I think everyone else wouldn't be. And so that's kind of what I need to go with there. And so I like Councilmember Porter's suggestions. On the, I agree on the tattoo and just leaving that in the industrial only as a permitted use. Working downtown, it isn't, I see those all over the place, downtown Salt Lake, and it is not just another storefront. It looks dramatically different compared to the other parts of downtown Salt Lake. And that's just the reality of it there. And then the self-storage, I don't know what anyone else's opinion is, but I think I'm comfortable leaving it as is versus creating this half-mile distance, because then we potentially could get pockets of units all over the place.
So part of the reason why we did that is because every office warehouse zone, every developer that has approached me about office warehouse, every single one of them since I've been here for almost 3 years has mentioned wanting to put in storage units in a large sum of it. And because we have limited office warehouse, we thought it would be wise to put a distance because all of our office warehouse will be eaten up a large majority by storage units. Also, because I drew a blank, but.
No, that's a good
That makes
suggestion. I think
sense.
you said that before, and I probably just didn't quite
That's
grasp
okay.
it there. I was focusing on
So the
something
half
else
mile
at
we
the
felt
time.
like was a fair distance. You know, and again, the other point, that's the other point of just kind of spreading it throughout the city so that they don't all just only go in one spot. But yeah, those were some of the thought processes behind it.
Probably should make a clarification. If you decide to go with the separation, we probably should specify property line to property line. We don't have that language in here right now. There's also one thing that I remembered too, is that we inadvertently left cemetery off the table. And so we put cemetery into the institutional zone category.
Okay. Because we're trying to get one. Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll entertain.
Mayor,
Yes.
it okay if I make a quick comment?
Sure.
Okay. So in terms of the tattoo parlor, right now it's not even allowed in how it's written in the table now. It doesn't even include industrial. It only has it permitted in office, warehouse, and in regional commercial. I absolutely agree that it shouldn't be in those. And the question is do we want it to be permitted only in industrial or included in office, warehouse, which is there now? And then for sure it needs to be taken out of I think it's regional commercial, in my opinion. I just want to get a clarification from the council on that before a decision's made. And then I really like the compromise on the 500 feet. And a thought is to make it more planning code type of approach. Instead of just saying if a road is in between, you could actually just reduce the distance of the cross section.
22 hours and a happy hour. You're breaking up, Councilman McComber.
500, clean that 500. So on the road, if we feel it needs to, it's a lot harder to go from 300 to 500 later. Is another argument. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
May I
Yes.
say something really quick? One of the problems that we would foresee with if we did do 500 for residential is taking, for example, the Northgate example, is that a hotel could not go there at all because the residential does slant in, the road slants. And so going 500 from the school and 500 from the residential would not permit a hotel in that area. And so that is one of the considerations, is that we have residential branches everywhere, and we don't want to preclude hotels from the entire city.
In that particular property as well, the topo alone creates more of a buffer as well. Anyways, I would agree. I mean, that's why we recommended 300 and 500, but it's your prerogative as a council what you prefer. So.
Can you show us that distance again?
I don't understand the comment where we're saying, hey, if we go up to 500, this precludes it from everywhere, because.
No, I don't mean from everywhere. It just makes it a lot more restrictive and difficult to find the locations to make it function appropriately. So we're just trying to create a balance that's not too restrictive or too much of a distance. But like I said, I mean, we're trying to go off and mirror similar to what Lehigh's doing.
Stop saying compared to Lehigh. I don't like how Lehigh is with their hotels and how that's associated next to and plop down right next to residential. That's not the model that I'm looking for. I don't want to make Saratoga Springs Lehigh.
Sorry, the reason
every time you say that makes me want to make it 800 feet. Just so you know.
The only reason why we're mentioning that is Lehigh is the only city we found that had distance requirements. All the others did not have any distance requirements. So that's why we're making the reference to that. So,
and there are thousands of acres in our city that this would fit. It's just right here in the north end of the city. And I got emails too, like Councilman Wilden, saying, we don't want this here. We don't want this at the entrance to, like, right behind us. We don't want this. We don't want this. Whether it's the school. And I actually had people saying they didn't want it in their backyard, etc. So for me,
we're losing you again.
I'm glad it wasn't just on the Zoom that this happening.
Mayor, if I could.
Again, it's a lot easier to go from 500 to 300.
Michael?
And coming back later and saying, no, we don't. We would not want to go.
You didn't get it?
Mayor, if I could, staff's official position is this is a policy issue, and you tell us what you want, and we'll be happy to put that in place.
Okay. Councilman McComber, you cut out on your last comment. It was entertaining, but we didn't understand.
Hello?
You there? Councilman McComber?
Hello?
There you are.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yep, there you are. We can hear you. Owen, can you?
Sorry, Mayor, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I was just saying again, it's easier to go from 500 to 300, changing down the road than going up, because the up is more of a taking the, setting the stricter parameters is easier now. Just over the years, I found that to be the case. That's my last argument.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had one question.
Okay.
In regards to the hotel, I remember last conversations was more around the lines of what type of hotel. Because it was, I remember the discussions in the past was, well, if it's this type of hotel, people wouldn't have that much of a problem, but it's because it's a, I forget what type of.
Extended stay.
Extended stay. And so I didn't know if, because it sounded like that's what some of the council members wanted in the code, if that was even possible, but. So-
Well, I think, if I may, Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry, like the Hilton Town Suites and the Marriott Resident Inns qualify as an extended stay. So, because you can rent by a week or whatever, so I don't.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that,
I don't think we want to limit by branding.
I
yeah.
forgot you were here already.
So it's not by branding, but I just remember that some of the council members on the code, they wanted to see if there's a way that extended stay wasn't an option. But,
I personally don't think there's a way.
okay, I just wanted
It's
to.
just me.
I think it has to be all hotels because the hotel can always change owners and become an extended stay.
Right.
But they did include in there disallowing motels.
Which was part of the concern.
Okay.
And then we did also draft standards for requiring security management.
That was good.
Perfect. Okay.
Sorry, I just had one more question.
Perfect.
Since I'm here and not speaking out of the sky anymore. Some of these permitted uses, we have the superscript 4 says there's additional requirements and stuff
Well,
like that.
that's what, yeah, that's what we get feedback from you. Are any of these uses that you would identify that you want to, obviously because they're going from conditional to permitted, are there some that you want us to bring back additional standards for?
Well, some of them you have additional, I'll just state, like the automobile repair major, automobile repair minor, there's a 4 there. But I don't know that, is there somewhere else in code? 'Cause I'm not
As far
familiar
as the
with
major goes, there's already a separation requirement for major.
the separation requirement.
Right.
Okay.
And that's probably the biggest thing for probably a lot of these uses is separation from,
Separations.
yeah.
Okay. So in general, if there's already a 4, there is some code written.
No, we would want your feedback to say, any of those that have a 4, do you want us to bring back to you standards?
Just because I mentioned those ones, let's bring back the automobile. Just so, I may be happy with what's there, but I just want to know I know that's been a hot button issue in the city previously. So I want to make sure as we're making this change that we're not then going back to a point where we're making a decision that we don't know that we're making. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So I would just, even if it's just a memo and maybe we all just say, yeah, no need to change. I would like to at least see what that 4 stands for in the code. Most of the other ones, I think, when I was looking through there, I understood why there was a 4.
Really,
The other one, and this one isn't necessarily the commuter light rail station. I know there's places where we want to encourage that and have that. We're permitting it in lots of different zones, which, rather than making it just in the institutional civic and zoning for them when they come through. We might want to have some guidance on what we want to see from that, even if it's, it needs to be adjacent to higher density uses or something like that, just because, or what zones it can be next to or something like that, just so that we can
bring back
make sure that
some
that's a
ideas.
good fit.
See, with this whole chart, there's still, like I said, we've been working on this for a few months, but when we do in January, it sped this up. We're still going to come back to you with more uses that we think should be on this chart.
Excellent.
And so we can include, those uses that you want to see additional standards for. We can bring those back at that time.
Looking through here today, on my way back, I could see how much work had gone into this, and so I appreciate all of that work.
Thanks goes to Rachel mostly.
The one other question, I guess, was recreation rentals. What is that referring to?
Sarah, you want to pull up the
Sure,
definition
I'm
on
assuming
that?
that's not timeshares that we're talking about.
We're talking like kayak rentals, mountain bike rentals.
That's
things
kind of what
like
I thought
that.
it was. Okay.
Yep. Or even maybe potentially ski-doos or something like that.
Right. I'm just double checking to see what it's in industrial mixed warehouse. Okay.
Yeah, mixed waterfront and regional commercial for recreation rentals.
That's, okay, that should be fine. I'm just thinking about the marina, the North Marina, and how that was gonna shake out, but that'll probably end up in mixed waterfront. So that should be fine. Okay. I honestly, I don't have any others that jump out at me as far as, that I want to put a 4 on that don't already have one, so.
Okay. With that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the code amendments, Title 19, conditional use permits, ordinances 20-7 dated today, including modifying to allow drive-throughs within neighborhood commercial, updating the table for tattoo, was it shops? Shops to be permitted in industrial only and not in the other zones. Selecting the option of a half-mile distance for the storage units, is that what we refer to them as? And then the hotel distance from existing residential zones, changing that from 500, or from 300 to 500, but allowing for a reduction for the width of the road if it's on the other side of an artillery. A large road,
Auxiliary.
arterial road, thank you for,
Yes.
does that make sense?
So if you have a hotel and it's on an arterial, but say there's residential within 400 feet, it doesn't matter, it would still be okay?
Yes, because if the roads, say if it's you have a 500-foot distance,
That'll act as the buffer, not the 500. Is that what you're saying?
yes, so you can,
What about behind the hotel?
But it can't be behind them.
Yeah.
right,
Residential would have to be on the other side of the major road.
Yes.
Yes.
Residential cannot be behind the hotel.
Correct.
so if it's separated, existing residential zones or homes or whatever are separated by an artillery road. I keep saying it wrong.
Artillery.
The A road, we'll
Yes.
just talk about that, the A road, that's even worse. But
The distance doesn't apply.
it can be reduced by that distance from those homes on the other side of the road.
But not to be less than 300, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does.
Because
And then
then there's
also-
homes
oh, sorry.
on the existing side of the road where they're planning on putting it, and it's within 500, it's not allowed. If the only other place is on the other side of the road, it can be reduced by the width of the road.
So basically, if with the width of the road, it's exactly 500 feet away, it can be reduced, and the road is, I don't know, I'm just making up a number, 100 feet, you reduce it, the distance only has to be 400 feet, is what you're saying.
Basically, if homes are right on the border of the road and they're 300 and the road's 200 feet,
Oh, okay, then from the road, and then, gotcha.
The right-of-way for arterials, including the trails on both sides, is 180 feet.
180 feet. I would
So-
say reduce it to, the requirement is reduced to 300.
That's why I was saying reduce it by the width of the road, and then that way you're covered.
Then it would be 320.
Correct. And that's the way it's doable because some roads are 180, some are 120, so, you know.
Because they're still gonna have to be 500 feet away from residential.
On the other side.
It's just that if they're on the other side of the road, it's still 500 feet.
Major buffer.
They're not gaining anything by going on the other side of the road, is what I'm saying.
Do you just keep it simple and say?
Because the road, if you're reducing it by the width of the road is essentially just part of that 500 feet.
Yeah. Do you just
Good
keep it
point.
simple and say if they're on the opposite side of an arterial road, that the distance requirement is 300 feet from the building?
That works.
Yes,
I think
that's
that
much
just
more clear.
simplifies it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to accommodate Councilmember McComber's comments, but Councilman McComber, your comments, there was a bandwidth issue, I think, and it was super slow, so.
Do you want to clarify from the hotel building to the residential property line or the residential?
Yes.
Because we may have a case where there's no structures there yet, but there's a residential zone.
Property line.
Property line.
So structure to property line, okay.
Yep.
So if it's separated by a road, it can be 300 feet.
Major arterial.
Arterial
Yes.
or larger. I don't know
I'm
if
not
you
gonna
know
try to
anymore.
say the
Is
name of
that
that
the
road again
so is
tonight.
that a residential zone or a residential property line?
Same difference.
No.
Even if you zone.
Property
well, I mean,
line.
if
No, because think about like an HOA, it's got a big buffer between homes and the
Oh,
road.
okay, I see what
I
you're saying.
think, did we say zone?
You
in
have the residential
recommendation?
zone.
Zone. Hotel building to residential zone.
Pre-built, they're still
Right.
Hotel building to residential zone?
Zone.
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 I think.
It's up on the screen. It
Well, the
says
way
zone.
it's currently written,
What does it say?
I guess I'm still in the middle of the motion.
Does this
Maybe I
say
need to redo
residential
this.
zone?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
probably
zone
need to
property,
finish a
so it stays
motion.
that way.
Yeah, just leave that.
Okay.
Okay, should I redo this motion?
Yeah.
All right, I move that we approve business item 3 with the adjustments allowing a drive-through neighborhood commercial, tattoo shop and industrial zone only, selecting the option of half-mile distances for self-storage and modifying the distance for a hotel from 300 to 500 unless it's separated by a road, a major road, and it can be 300.
Okay.
What kind of road?
And adding cemetery and industrial, or no, institutional
Oh,
zone.
yes, thank you.
Okay. I have a first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who? Councilman Porter for a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I want to talk about real quick the drive-throughs in neighborhood commercial. I like not having drive-throughs in neighborhood commercial. I think it creates a buffer and between other commercial zones and neighborhoods. I think it starts to defeat the purpose of neighborhood commercial and it increases traffic in those commercial zones. And I would not be in favor of that motion with that in there.
Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion on the table. As it stands, we'll do a roll call. Councilman Badesca? Aye. McComber?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Carn?
Nay on the issue I discussed.
Okay. Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion for the minutes for February 18th.
So moved for the minutes within the.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Wilden, a second from Councilman Porter. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. There's no need for closed session tonight, so the meeting is adjourned.